In a date palm grove outside Nizwa, a farmer opens the wooden gate of an irrigation channel and lets water run toward his neighbour's plot at the hour written on a schedule, inherited across generations. On the Dhofar coast, in the harbour town of Mirbat, fog moves sideways across a hillside that should, by every map, be desert. And a family from Dubai unpacks a picnic in the wet grass. In a workshop in Bahla, a man's hands have been on the same wheel for 41 years, and the clay between his fingers carries the red-brown of the hills outside the door. This is the Sultanate of Oman, 3.5 million people on the southeastern edge of the Arabian Peninsula, an Arabia of low stone and slow coffee, where the tallest building in the capital is still a mosque. "55 years ago, this country had 3 schools, 10 kilometres of paved road, and a door that was locked from the inside. The man who unlocked it decided almost alone what kind of modernity would be allowed in. What follows is a country read through 5 of its quiet decisions: a height limit, a monsoon, a coffee pot, a classroom, and a wheel that has kept turning. At 6 in the morning in Muscat, the loudest thing in the city is a voice. The call to prayer rises from a single minaret the color of bone, and the city beneath it holds still for a few seconds longer than a city of 1.6 million people ought to be able to. Every roofline within view is white, or the sand pale that white becomes when the sun has not yet cleared the headland. And none of those rooflines reaches the height of the minaret itself. A street sweeper crosses an empty intersection. A pickup truck idles outside a bakery. The light has not yet decided what color the day will be. This is the capital of the Sultanate, and it does not have a skyline. The reason is on the books. In the years after 1970, building heights in central Muscat were capped at a small number of stories in most districts, with narrow exceptions granted by planning approval. No commercial tower in the capital reaches the height of the tallest minaret of the Sultan Qaboos Grand Mosque, which rises to about 90 meters. The color palette of the city, white, ivory, the color of weathered bone, is coded into the same regulation. A capital made of one paragraph of law. The man who signed that paragraph was Sultan Qaboos bin Said, who took power in July 1970 in a near-bloodless palace coup against his own father, and who would rule until his death in January 2020. The country he inherited had almost nothing built into it. The country he left had a building code that refused to compete with the cities to the north, where towers in Dubai and Doha already cleared 300 meters. Muscat would stay low. The minaret would stay tallest. The rule has held for half a century. By 715, the city has begun to move. On a residential street 5 minutes from the harbour, a man in a fresh white dishdasha, the ankle-length cotton robe that is the everyday uniform of public life for Omani men, walks his daughter to the gate of her school. The brass burner on the threshold of a neighbour's house is still smoking faintly, the last of the morning's frankincense lifting into a sky now the colour of pale milk. The neighbour has gone back inside. The smell stays on the doorframe. It is a household habit older than the traffic, older than the school, older than the rule that keeps the buildings low enough for the smell to reach the street at all. A woman in a long embroidered abaya crosses at the corner. Behind her, 3 stories of housing, then a wall, then more housing, then sky. The line of the city stays level. A large share of Omanis are young enough to have grown up entirely inside the new Oman. And many of the children walking to school this morning have never seen their capital from any angle that required looking up. The city fits the body. A car door closes. Someone calls a name across a courtyard. A pigeon lifts off a low parapet, and the sky behind it runs uninterrupted from one horizon to the other. By dusk, the white walls have turned the color of apricot, and the second-to-last call to prayer crosses the same roof lines it crossed at dawn. The minaret is still the tallest thing in the frame. The shadow it casts reaches almost to the harbour. A boy on a bicycle rides through that shadow without slowing down, the way a person rides through something that has been there his whole life. The lamps along the corniche come on one by one, each sitting below the second story of the buildings behind it. 800 kilometres south, the rule still holds. The weather does not. In Mirbat, on the Dhofar coast, the fog does not fall. It moves sideways. It comes in off the Arabian Sea at the end of June and runs against the green slope of the Kara Mountains. And for 10 weeks of the year, a country mostly the color of sand turns the color of a wet lawn. The hillsides above the harbor grow grass thick enough to lie on. Streams that have no name on any map find their way down through the limestone and pool against the stone walls of houses that were built 200 years ago for a different climate entirely. A fishing boat sits at its mooring in grey water. The hull beads with damp. The horizon is gone. This is Kharif, the southwest monsoon, and Oman is the only country on the Arabian Peninsula that has one. It runs from roughly the 21st of June to the early days of September. Outside those weeks, Dhofar is desert. Inside them, it is a place that the rest of the Gulf cannot quite believe exists. Until the late 20th century, this was a private weather event. Fishermen knew the season. Bedouin families who summered their camels on the high pastures knew the season. The rest of the country did not particularly, and the rest of the Gulf did not at all. Then, in 1998, the state founded the Salalah Tourism Festival, and the season was given a calendar, a brochure, and a price. In recent seasons, visit counts have approached or passed 800,000. The license plates parked along the road to Mirbat read Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar. Gulf families who have driven for 2 and 3 days across the empty quarter to sit on a blanket in wet grass and let their children touch a leaf. On a hillside above the town, a family from Dubai has set out a picnic. The thermos is the kind that holds coffee for 6 hours. 2 children are barefoot in the grass, which is something that does not happen at home. The father films the fog with a phone held at chest height. The mother is laughing at the cold. They're wearing fleece in late July. The temperature is 22 degrees, which on the Arabian Peninsula in the middle of summer is a kind of small miracle that costs a tank of fuel and a hotel booking. Mirbat itself is older than this trade. The harbour predates the monsoon economy by 1,000 years. In the medieval period, this was one of the principal frankincense ports on the Indian Ocean rim, and the place from which Arabian horses were shipped east to the courts of India. The town now holds roughly 5,000 people. The fort on the headland is whitewashed every few years. The boats in the harbour still go out at dawn for the kingfish and the tuna. The monsoon economy is the new layer. The older one is still working underneath it. In a low house on a lane, 2 streets back from the water, a grandmother pulls a wet shawl tighter across her shoulders and lights a small kerosene burner just inside the open doorway. 2 cousins have driven down from the interior, where it has not rained in 11 months, and they have brought their children to see the green. She sets the kettle on the burner. The smell of cardamom lifts into the doorway and meets the smell of wet limestone coming in from outside, and for a moment, the 2 smells hold the threshold between them. She pours the first cup short, the way it is meant to be poured. The cousins take their cups with both hands. Outside, the fog has come right down to the lane, and a child runs through it laughing, without being able to see the wall at the end. By early September, the cars from the north will turn around and drive home. The grass will yellow within 3 weeks. The streams will go back to being lines on a slope that no one walks. The fort will keep its whitewash. When the cars from the north drive home,
The country returns to its older clock, the one measured in cups.
The cup that the grandmother in Mirbat poured is the same cup in shape and in posture that is being lifted at this hour in a household in the interior where it has not rained in 11 months, and where the door opens onto a courtyard the color of straw. A woman in a long embroidered dress lowers a brass coffee pot toward a small, handleless cup on a tray. Her hand is steady. The pour is short, not more than 2 fingers high, in a cup the size of a thimble. The pot is set down between cups, not held over the tray, so the guest hears it touch the brass and knows that the pour is finished for now, and that the next pour is coming. This is kahwa, the Omani way with coffee. Pale gold, not the dark brown of the cities to the north, lightly roasted, cardamom forward, sometimes with a few threads of saffron, sometimes a clove. It is served in cups the size of a thimble, and it is refilled until the guest tilts the cup sideways between thumb and finger, the small gesture that means enough. Three rounds is the floor of a proper visit, not the ceiling. The tray that comes out with the pot carries dates beside it. Khalas dates this morning, sticky at the stems, piled in a small dish. The dish is refilled before it can empty. The room is a majlis, the reception space that exists in some form in nearly every Omani house of any age. A long carpeted floor, cushions against 3 walls, a low door that the host enters first. The room is older than the kitchen, in the sense that the kitchen serves the family and the majlis serves everyone else. And a country in which everyone else might arrive without warning has built the majlis into its floor plan for a very long time. The visit moves slowly, because the room is built for slowness. The cushions invite sitting and discourage rising. Much of what is unspoken in this room was once formally taught. After 1970, in the same wave of state building that produced the Height Code and the school system, women's associations and domestic craft training spread across the country's regions. How the pot is held, how the dates are laid out, how long a proper visit lasts, and how it ends without anyone naming the end. There are branches now in every governorate. The training is unglamorous and almost invisible. Its consequence is a country in which a stranger who knocks on a door at the wrong hour is still given the first cup short, the dates within reach, and a place to sit that requires no apology for arriving. The pot moves again. A second pour.
The conversation has not raised its voice. A child has come into the room and gone out again with a date in his hand. The pot is set down. The host's daughter, 12 years old, is watching the way the cup is offered, the way the tray is carried, the way the pot is set down so that it touches the brass. She is learning by sight, the way the host learned, the way the host's mother learned. A window onto the courtyard is open. Beyond the wall, the white minaret of the neighborhood mosque is just visible, and the midday call to prayer crosses the rooftops the way the dawn call crossed Muscat hours ago. Heat shimmers off the wall behind the minaret. The visit pauses. The host stands. The pot stays warm on its small burner. The clock that runs in this room is the second clock, the slower one, the one that runs underneath the tourism clock and the oil clock both. It was not always like this. The clock that runs in this room was wound in 1970. Before that, the door was locked.
In the summer of 1969, a child sat at a wooden table in a coastal village house and read aloud from a borrowed Quran by ear, because there was no school within reach. The light on the table came from a single oil lamp. There was no public electricity in the village. There was no public electricity in most of the country. The Quran was borrowed because there was no library, and the child read by ear because the only person in the household who could read had learned in the same way, from someone who had learned in the same way, going back as far as anyone could remember. The Sultan in those years was Saeed bin Taimur, who ruled from 1932 to 1970, and who had decided, against the advice of nearly every advisor he had, that the country would be sealed against the 20th century. His logic was austere and consistent. Modernity, he believed, brought debt, foreign influence, and political instability. He refused most of it. By 1970, the country he had governed for 38 years had 3 formal schools, all primary, all for boys, with a combined enrollment of roughly 900 students. It had 1 hospital run by an American mission. It had roughly 10 kilometers of paved road, all of it inside the capital. The permit system told the rest of the story. A young man in Sur who wanted to ride a bicycle to his uncle's house applied through his district wali and waited. A merchant in Mutra who wanted sunglasses against the harbor glare applied and waited.
A boy who wanted to leave the country to study in Cairo or Karachi applied and was, almost always, refused. The radio was banned in many districts. The gates of the walled capital were closed at dusk and not reopened until dawn. In the south, the country was also at war with itself. The Dhofar Rebellion, which ran from the mid-1960s into the mid-1970s, was a guerrilla insurgency by leftist fighters in the same mountains above Mirbat where the fog now brings picnickers. Whole villages were depopulated. Wells were poisoned. The British provided officers and air support to the Sultan's forces. The fighting did not end cleanly until 1976. Many of the men who walk the cliffs above Mirbat today as park rangers, or who sit in the shaded majlis of an evening, are the sons and grandsons of people who chose sides in that war, or who lost family on both sides of it. On the 23rd of July, 1970, Sultan Qaboos bin Said deposed his father in a palace coup in Salalah. His father was flown to London, where he would die 2 years later in a hotel suite at the Dorchester, in exile and almost alone. Qaboos was 29. The country he inherited had a literacy rate, by most estimates, below 10%. Within 5 years, hundreds of new schools had been built. Within a decade, girls were in classrooms in numbers that had no precedent in the country's history. Within 20 years, paved roads reached the interior. The door that had been locked from the inside was opened, and a great deal walked through it at once. The child at the wooden table in 1969, if she lived, is now in her 60s. Her own children went to school. Her grandchildren are in school this morning. And the same wave of state building that put them at their desks reached, eventually, the workshops where their grandfathers' trades were already half forgotten.
In a workshop on the edge of Bahla, in the interior of Oman, 2 hours by road from the coast, a potter sits at a wheel that turns by foot. His name in the village is known. In this telling, his hands carry it. The wheel is wooden, old enough that the grain has gone dark where his heel rests on it, and the clay between his fingers is the local red-brown earth, the color that Omanis call by the name of the place it comes from. He has been at this wheel for 41 years. His father was at it before him. The shape rising under his thumbs is a water jar of a kind that has been made in this oasis for at least 3,000 years. Bahla is a UNESCO World Heritage Site listed in 1987 for its mud brick fort and the oasis walls that surround it, and it is one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements on the Arabian Peninsula. It is also, by quiet state choice, a place where pottery is a job a man can support a family on. In the 1980s,
as oil revenue began to reshape the country, the government faced a question that most petro-economies do not bother to ask out loud. What happens to the trades when no one needs them to live? The answer Oman wrote into policy was that certain crafts would be salaried. The Public Authority for Craft Industries, established in 2003 in its current form, channels training, equipment, and stipends to potters in Bahla, silversmiths in Nizwa, weavers in the Sharqiya, and boat builders along the coast. The wheel turns because the state decided the wheel would turn. The jar grows under his hands at a speed unlike the speed of anything else made in this century. He wets a thumb. He widens the rim by the width of a fingernail. The wall of the jar is now thinner than the wall of a teacup, and it still holds its shape. Outside the open door, 3 apprentices in their 20s are wedging clay against a stone slab. Their dishdashas are dusted at the knees. One of them is the potter's nephew. Another is from a family that has never made pottery and who applied to the program 3 years ago because the stipend pays better than the work he could find in Muscat. The state pays him to learn what the potter knows. The potter is paid to teach him. On the cliffs above Mirbat, 800 kilometers south, a Bedouin man in a beige uniform walks the boundary of a protected wadi, counting ibex with binoculars on a strap around his neck. His grandfather kept camels on this same slope and slept under the same overhang on cold nights. The man wears the uniform of the Environment Authority. His radio crackles once and falls quiet. The job is a job his grandfather would not have recognized. On a slope, his grandfather would have known with his eyes closed. The slope is the same slope. In Bahla, the potter lifts the finished jar onto a plank and sets it among the others to dry. There are 14 jars on the plank. By tomorrow morning, there will be 20. By the end of the month, the kiln at the back of the workshop will be loaded. The fire will be lit at 4 in the morning, and the jars will come out the color of the local earth, which is the color they have always been. The minaret in the center of Bahla calls the afternoon prayer. The wheel slows. The potter wipes his hands on a cloth that has been wiped on for longer than some of his apprentices have been alive. He stands. He walks to the door. The light outside is the color of apricot, the way it was over Muscat at the close of a day 800 kilometers to the north, in a city that decided half a century ago what it would and would not allow itself to become. He leaves the door open behind him. By the time the potter returns to his wheel the next morning, the call to prayer has crossed Muscat again, and the man in the fresh white dishdasha is walking his daughter to the same school gate. The brass burner is smoking faintly on the neighbor's threshold. The minaret is still the tallest thing on the skyline. 6 in the morning. The light has not yet decided. In Mirbat, the fog will return in late June. The grandmother's kettle is on a shelf. The fort on the headland was whitewashed in April. $3.5 million people. 5 quiet decisions. One wheel still turning.